Good morning, sir. The article that I will be discussing and that I have chosen is Article 1290 to 1294. Article 1290. When all the requisites mentioned in Article 1279 are present, compensation takes effect by operation of law and extinguishes both debts to the concurrent amount, even though the creditors and debtors are not aware of the compensation. Okay, this provision talks about the moment compensation takes effect in legal compensation, in contrast to voluntary compensation, where compensation takes effect from the time agreed by the parties or by the judicial authorities. In this provision, Article 1290, the effect of compensation will take place from the moment which judgment becomes final and executory. The legal compensation takes effect only when the following requisites are present. First one, each one of the obligors are bound principally, and that the obligors are at the same time creditors of each other. Second one is both debts consist in a sum of money, or if the things due are consumable, they are of the same kind and also of the same quality if the latter has been stated. And the third one is that both debts are due. And the fourth one is that both debts are liquidated and also demandable. And the last one, which is the fifth one, is that both debts are not subject to retention or controversy commenced by third parties and communicated in due time to the debtor. Section 6. Novation. Article 1291. Obligation may be modified by first, changing their object or principal condition. Second is substituting the person of the debtor. And the third one is subrogating a third person in the rights of the creditor. First, what is novation? Well, novation is the substitution of a new contract for an old one. The new agreement extinguishes the rights and obligations that were in effect under the old agreement. A novation ordinarily arises when a new individual assumes an obligation to pay that was incurred by the original party to the contract. Okay, there are kinds of novation. First is as to their essence. Okay, first novation is the object or real novation. This novation is effected by changing the object or principal condition of the obligation. That is the first one. And the second one is subjective or personal novation. It is effected by substituting the person of the debtor or subrogating a third person to the rights of the creditor. Okay, substituting the person of the debtor is called a passive novation, while subrogating a third person to the right of the debtor is called active novation. There is also mixed novation. It will arise when objective novation and subjective novation will combine together. And there is also a novation as the form of their constitution. First one is how it is expressed. How will you express that there is a declaration of unequivocal terms that the old obligation is extinguished by the new obligation. And the third and second one is How it is implied? It is implied when there are no express declaration that the old obligation is extinguished by the new obligation. As to the extent of their effects, there is total or extinctive when the original obligation is completely extinguished. There is no novation will happen. Wala na'y kanang wala na'y do you call that? Wala na'y new contract nga mo arise from the same parties as in the old contract. Bali wala na jud siya, wala na'y mahitabo lain again. But there is also 4 requisites of extinctive novation. That is, first one is that if there is an existence of a previous valid obligation. The second one is if there is an agreement of all the parties to the new contract. The third one is the third one is the extinguishment of the old obligation or contract. And the fourth one is the validity of the new contract. Okay. And as to their origin, there is also novation. There is also a novation arises as to their origin. The first one is the legal novation, where it takes place by operation of law, while conventional novation, it will take place by agreement of the parties inside that contract. And there is also a novation in as to presence or absence of condition. Okay, there is what you call pure novation. This is when the creation of new obligation is not subject to any condition. And the second one is the conditional novation. It will arise when the creation of new obligation is subject to a condition. Article 1293. Novation, which consists in substitution a new debtor in the place of the original one, may be made even without the knowledge or against the will of the latter, but not without the consent of the creditor. Payment by the new debtor gives him the rights mentioned in Articles 1236 and 1237. Okay, there are 2 kinds of substitution of debtor. The first one is the expromission, which when a third person initiatively takes place the obligation even without the consent or against the will of the original debtor, but with the consent of the creditor. For example, si Mr. A ang original debtor, and Mr. B is the third person, while Mr. C is the creditor. Si Mr. B, pwede niya i-fulfill ang obligation ni Mr. A without the knowledge of Mr. A, but with the consent of Mr. C. Okay, naman siya. And also, okay, and the second one is the delegation. It is when the debtor offers and the creditor accept a third party person to take place for the satisfaction of the original debtor's obligation. In this agreement, they are called as delegante or the debtor, and delegatario is the creditor, and the delegado is the third person here. In the release of the old debtor must be released from the obligation after the substitution. Otherwise, there is no novation, and the third person who assumed the obligation without the release becomes co-debtor or surety. Absence of agreement as to solidarity will then both the original and the new debtors are considered obligated jointly. So, ang sa creditor nga side, kuan ra gyapon siya, he or she may still enforce the obligation against the original debtor without the release. Article 1294. If the substitution is without the knowledge or against the will of the debtor, the new debtor's insolvency or non-fulfillment of the obligation shall not give rise to any liability on the part of the original debtor. Okay, so kani nga article, mobalik ta sa kind sa duha ka substitution. Sa duha ka substitution of debtor. Mobalik ta sa expromission. It is the act by which a creditor accepts new debtor who becomes bound instead of the old and the latter being released. It is a species of novation. In this substitution, it is substitution by expromission. This article 1294 wants to imply that if there is insolvency on the part of the new debtor, the same cannot be enforced against the old debtor because the latter didn't make the initiative in making a change, which might have been made without even his knowledge. So kani siya nga article daw nakakuan siya nga for example katong new debtor kay kanang na insolvent na siya, dili ang iyahang non-fulfillment sa obligation dili na mo balik dito sa original debtor since ang obligation kay naa naman sa iyaha. Mao na siya ang gusto i-imply ani nga article. So